On today's podcast, we focus on offense, and we're going to talk to one of the best performing offenses in the country, the head coach and offensive coordinator of Lakeland University, Colin Bruton. Colin, it's great to have you here today.
Hey, I appreciate it, Keith. Great to be here.
So, Coach, this offense you have, for our listeners, number 4 in the country at 523.4 yards per game, number 10 in scoring offense at 45.1 points per game. Numbers that, when you look at them, you're like, wow, those are off the charts, So we're definitely going to dig into some of the offense here, but want to step back and talk about your start in coaching and going back to the beginning. What was it for you that really made you want to go into this profession and become a football coach?
Yeah, it was, went to college and I played college ball at a Division III school in Illinois, played at Benedictine University. Entered college thinking I was going to law school. I was a political science major, and my plan was to be a law student and obviously maybe make a little bit more money than a college football coach makes at times. But, as I was going through college, just didn't feel like I could give it up and loved the game, always loved the game. Was always a guy who was never the most athletic guy, but was a guy that really was a smart player and kind of understood scheme and technique and that kind of stuff. And that allowed me to have some success as a player, because I wasn't a guy that was going to jump off the charts at a combine or anything like that. Kind of as I went along through college, sometime around my sophomore year, I decided that I think coaching is what I wanted to do. And, had some opportunities, had an opportunity to become a graduate assistant at Wisconsin Platteville, and that kind of started it. And just kind of fell in love with coaching and working with young athletes and making a difference. And, been very fortunate to have opportunities to continue in this profession.
When you look at what drove you to become a coach and where you are right now, how is that, I guess, drive and some of the things behind it evolved? And obviously you add to that as you become a coach and see things in a different way. So how's that evolved for you?
I think a lot of it's the evolution of kind of role. Coming in as a graduate assistant and, your focus is really your position group and your focus is kind of relationships with that small group. And I think the biggest thing for me, going from that role, my second role was as a coordinator, so I went from being a GA for 3 years to being a coordinator and see the role changes, the expectations change, the pressure changes, but it's still about relationships. And I think that's the thing that's probably, been the thing that I think once you're in the profession, you realize is most important. It's the relationship with the other coaches, it's the relationship with your players, with your athletes, relationships with people on campus and things like that. And that hasn't changed, transitioning 7 years ago to becoming the head coach here at Lakeland. It really didn't change. The game is about relationships and, the X's and O's stuff and the scheme and all that stuff is important and you need to have it, but it ultimately starts and ends with relationships. If you can build the right relationships and have kids that, believe in what you're about as a program, and that's really what's most important. And I think that's probably where, for me, the evolution happened. I think getting into coaching, you think it's like playing Madden, it's picking plays and it's that stuff. And really when you get in it, you realize that that's a part of it, but it's a very small part of it. The biggest part is just building relationships and continuing to grow positive relationships. And I think that's the thing that, for me in my evolution, it hasn't changed as far as that being the biggest part of it, but the relationships have changed. It's changed when my role has changed, and my relationship to players when I was just a GA was different than my relationship when I was their coordinator versus being the head coach. The relationship changes. And I think that's good, and I think that's okay. I think also, the kids have changed a little bit, and I'm not one of those. I'm only 40, so I'm not one of those guys that talks back in my day and all that kind of stuff, but it has changed a little bit, and different rules have changed a little bit. It's just a little different than it was.
When you look back to your early days, and for all of us, there's that one thing we know, right? Maybe it starts with one thing and we expand for there. But for you early on, what was, I guess, your quote-unquote major in this game? And then what would you say would be, a minor and something that developed with you along the way?
Yeah, I think for me, I always played in the defensive backfield, so I'm really a defensive guy. I'm coordinating the offense here at Lakeland, but I coordinated the defense here at Lakeland for 13 years before moving over to offense. For me, early on, I always had a really good understanding of coverage, back-end coverages defensively. Just understood that. I think had a good understanding. I was a basketball guy as well, basketball player, so I think spatial awareness and things like that. I was always good there. My first start, I coached outside linebackers in a 3-4 scheme, and that was kind of where I started the GA, and quite honestly didn't have a huge understanding of, what run fits meant or, technique. When you're walking up that weak side outside linebacker, you're essentially now coaching a defensive end. And that for me was really foreign. So I think learning kind of how everything fit defensively. When you're playing corner, and that's what I played in college, when you're playing cover three, you really don't care too much about what's going on in front of you. So I think that's part of the evolution. And I think for me, with our GAs here, I always say, like, year one, you need to be able to coach your position and coach their technique. And then year two, we hope you have a better understanding of the whole package. And then if you're around for a third year, you should be able to say, hey, this is what we should do and this is the adjustment we should make. And I think that's kind of the evolution. But for me, it was always, I think I always understood coverage. And then just kind of from there, obviously your knowledge grows every year.
For you, as you develop and evolve as a coach and you think back to some of your mentors in this game, what are the lessons that really stuck with you and stand out and really became part of who you are as a coach?
I think the need to build relationships is the big one. I think, and I GA'd, like I said, at UW-Platteville, and Mike Emendorfer was the head coach then, and he just stepped down, retired from Platteville. But, he was a guy, I think, early on in his career, was a guy that was one of the innovators with the spread, and scheme-wise was great, and always was innovative, cutting edge with what they were doing in the passing game at Platteville. I think as I was there for 3 years at Platteville, Mike really started to transition from being a guy who was still very scheme-based, but being a guy that was more relationship-based. And I think you saw that program at Platteville kind of take off when he made that change. And I think that was, for me, it was eye-opening. It became more about how can we develop the person rather than how can we, run curl flat a different way and things like that. So I think that was a big one for me, is just, recognizing that, came to Lakeland, and I worked for Kevin Daugherty, and Kevin was the same way. We recruit here at Lakeland. We have a very diverse roster and kids from all sorts of different backgrounds, and the ability to find ways to relate to kids from all over what was important, and just continuing to build those relationships. And those I think, taken from those two guys who I worked for were really huge. Just continue to build relationships and give kids the idea that you care about them more than just as a football player. And I think that's important, and it's been important to our growth in our program at Lakeland.
You mentioned that you used to coordinate the defense before, and you did have some top nationally ranked defenses as a defensive coordinator. So what, for you, made that transition that, hey, I'm going to go over the offensive side of the ball and focus on coordinating an offense?
A couple things. I think Eric Tresky was our offensive coordinator here, and Eric took the head coaching job at Wisconsin Lutheran at his alma mater, and Eric's one of my great friends, and so we had an opening and was kind of deciding what I wanted to do or how I wanted to fill that opening, and there was really a couple factors. The first was Mitch Shepard was our defensive GA at the time, and he's outstanding, and he's a guy who I thought was ready to become a coordinator and ready to kind of take on a bigger role in our program. And he was a guy that I was going to lose. He was a GA, was looking for that full-time opportunity. So we were going to lose him if we didn't have the ability to promote him type thing. I knew he was ready and honestly knew that what he wanted to do defensively was probably a little better fit than what I was doing defensively at the time. The other thing, and probably the bigger factor, was I just think you have the ability to control things so much more offensively than you do defensively. Defensively, we were a very aggressive defensive scheme, but you're still kind of in a reactionary mode defensively. With offense, you can control the tempo of the game. You can control things just down and distance decisions. There was many times where, when you're coordinating the defense and you're meeting at the sideline, you're not, or you're meeting at the bench, you're not on the sidelines to really see what's going on from an offense standpoint. So you're making sometimes those, decisions whether you're going to go for it on fourth down with really not having a feel for what happened on the previous downs. And those are some of the things that I thought, I just wanted more control over as the head coach. There were things, Eric did an outstanding job coordinating our offense. We were, had great offenses before him. Tyler Wellman, who's now at Shrine, coordinated our offense and did a great job as well. And we had some nationally ranked offenses. But I felt like tempo-wise, I wanted to play faster. I wanted to be, my personality, I'm not very risk-averse. So I want to take shots and take chances and be a very, very aggressive offense. And I felt like, I had the ability to do that if I moved into that role.
I remember sitting down with Eric Tresky at the convention in San Antonio the last time it was there. We're going there again this weekend, but sitting down and talking some ball with him. And he's, afterwards I developed his podcast. He's been a guest on the podcast and definitely a sharp young coach. When you took over the offense, and I know Eric did some brilliant things, but how did you really maybe have, again, having been a defensive coordinator, How did you take that knowledge of the game and what you had learned as a defensive guy and really, I guess, leveraged it to what you wanted to do on offense as you evolved and it became you coordinating the offense?
Yeah, I think that, it's an advantage when you have that experience on the other side of the ball. And, one of the advantages I had taking over offensively here was that we weren't restarting. A lot of the things that we're doing, even terminology and things like that, we didn't change. We took a lot of the things that Eric was doing and continued them and obviously put our tweaks on it. But I think just looking at the things that gave me trouble as a coordinator, when I coordinated our defense, we were a heavy cover 1, cover 0 team, a lot of different blitz packages, a lot of different blitz looks, a lot of different pressure looks. And it's really hard to do that when you're playing at tempo, and it's really hard to disguise looks when you're playing at tempo. If you're playing cover 1 and a team's playing fast, you got to show cover 1, and that's some of the things that offensively, we play extremely fast. We're a very up-tempo offense. And that's one of the things that right away I said, this is something that defensively has always given me trouble. We want to take it over to that side of the ball. I think some of just the different things with just some route concepts and things like that we've done, offensively are things that gave us trouble. Again, when I was coordinating the defense, we had issues when I coordinated the defense. Our best run play here offensively at Lakeland this past year was speed option. And that was another area where I think if you can become a good team at speed option, you can put some different stresses on the defense. So that's something that again, stressed us when I was coordinated defense. So it's something that we want to try to bring into our offense and run more effectively and more often. So just things like that. I think you're always looking at saying, what gives me trouble? And then from there, it's how can I pass that trouble on to somebody else?
Yeah. Interesting. The speed option, you've seen that really become utilized more, right? It kind of disappeared for a little bit, but you start to see more and more of that speed option now. But taking a look at the overall philosophy, you mentioned you want to be an up-tempo team, but what would you say are the main pillars of here's how we're going to run our offense, and the things that, when you sit down meeting one with your players to install it or, bring a new coach in, that you talk about here's our offense, here's our pillars, this is what we build on? Yeah,
I think, for us, just schematically, we're a spread scheme. So we're a true 10 personnel offense. So we're trying to spread you out sideline to sideline. We're going to put our outside receivers at the bottom of the numbers and really try to use all 53 yards of horizontal room. From there, kind of our base philosophy, we want every one of our skill kids, and I say skill kid, every one of the guys that can touch the ball to be a threat. I think some offenses, when I coordinate a defense, you could key on certain guys or certain positions and say that, they're very heavy throwing the ball to their outside receivers or whatever it might be. So, really try to make every one of our guys be a threat to the defense at all times. One of the principles for us is that everyone has to be an athlete. Everyone has to be physical. So if you're going to play for us on the outside, you got to be somebody that's willing to block. You got to be physical. We're like everybody else. We're tagging the screen game, tagging our quick game stuff to our run game. And that only works if you have receivers that are willing to be physical and willing to block. So that's something that I think you just got to get that buy-in right away. And then we say everyone has to be an athlete. We're primarily a zone scheme up front. So we need kids up front that can move, that can move their feet and get to the second level. There's not a whole lot of room anymore for the big offensive linemen that it's just down blocking. They got to be athletes, got to be willing to move. And then I think the other thing for us is just we talk about attack mode. We want to be in attack mode at all times. We started off, when I took over the offense, we started off with a couple different tempos. And our kids kind of went away and just said, hey, we don't, we want to play fast. So we're trying to snap the ball. Our goal is at about 12 seconds. So, 28 on the play clock, we're hoping to get the ball snapped. And then if we need to slow it down, we will just by holding the call a little bit. But we're trying to play fast at all times. We're just being attack mode at all times. We just constantly put that strain on the defense.
So your kids came to you and said, hey, we want to play fast, coach. And 12 seconds is pretty fast. I remember doing a study when we were looking at how we would want to use tempo, that most crews are going to, depending on the level you're at, you can get that ball spotted somewhere between 9 and 11 seconds if you're really pressing it, right? They'll take longer if you're taking longer. If you're moving, it still takes them 9 to 11 seconds to get the ball ready for play. So 12 seconds is really fast. So for you, what are the keys, first of all, to get your guys to perform in game at that level? What things do you have to do in the install and in practice to make sure that you're moving at that fast of a pace?
We start every day with a tempo period. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the ball on the 50-yard line, and we're going to move into the end zone. We do it against air. But we're trying to run 5 to 6 plays and score in under a minute. It's kind of our goal. So we're going to change formation and obviously just signaling our plays as we always do, and just try to play it at tempo. I think it's getting your guys to understand they constantly have to be moving. So you'll see our guys, our offense line, when the ball's in the air, they're starting to move. Starting to move to where the ball may be, and if it's incomplete, they're going to move back then. But just constantly preaching, tempo. Our guys probably hear me scream the word tempo, 200 times a practice. Just tempo, and try to get them on the ball. But it starts with that tempo period every day. I mean, that for us is about a 5-minute period every day. We'll run all of our guys through, kind of every line of the depth chart through that tempo period at least once or twice. But it's just a constant thing. We do everything we do at tempo. So, if we're going a 7-on-7 period, we're moving the ball in 7-on-7. We use the whole field for 7-on-7, and it's just constantly that tempo, and our guys just constantly moving. I think once you get the buy-in, it becomes easier to kind of keep it going. We signal in our formations. We also just scream our formations out. So we're screaming. Luckily we don't play in front of 100,000 people.
Right.
We're screaming out the formation. We're screaming out our backfield set, and we're also signaling at the same time. So our guys are moving. And then schematically, we don't flip our outside receivers at all. Mm-hmm. So our left outside, our right outside aren't going to flip. Our slots obviously will be our adjusters. Our back, when we go empty, would be our adjuster. But our outside guys aren't going to flip. And I think that just not having to run, sideline to sideline helps.
When you look at the schemes that go along with the tempo, and again, coming from the defensive side now, what schemes do you feel really stress a defense when you add the tempo into it?
I think anytime you can kind of mix horizontal stretch with vertical stretch, it's going to be really tough. So for us, everything we do in the run game, we're going to attach obviously our single receiver, our free access route, and then we're also going to have our screen attached to our trip side or our two-man side. So I think just that horizontal stretch becomes really tough. I think anytime, you put formation into the boundary, that's tough just because it's not something that a defense is used to seeing. A lot of defenses that are field or boundary-based, they're trying to get lined up and trying to get set, and then all of a sudden when you have formation into the boundary, that becomes a check for a lot of teams. I think going empty, again, is one of those things that becomes a check for a lot of defenses. A lot of defenses say, hey, we're going to have a call in, but if you go empty, we got to check. We have a couple different things we can run against empty. So I think when you're able to line up and snap the ball quickly, and you can give them something that is going to be an automatic check to them, it becomes tough. I think anytime a defense has to change when you're snapping the ball in 12 or 14 seconds, that becomes really tough. So there's some things like that. There's some teams that we play that we know, after about a series, anytime we go empty, this is going to be their auto check. And it's really hard to have more than one auto check when you're playing that fast. So really, really quickly we can say, okay, we get, if we line up in this look, we know we're going to get this look, and that makes it easier. I think that's the biggest thing you'll see with tempo is you're going to get a lot more simplicity. Defense has gotten better. They're going to one-word calls, things like that, but you're still going to get more simplicity of look. You're not going to, the playbook shrinks, and it has to shrink when you're playing that fast.
When you look at the aspect of the defensive side of things, right, having been there, having been the defensive coordinator in your program as well, a lot of times when you talk to tempo coaches, right, it's a challenge to get the defense to understand, we're going to operate this way, and you're going to have to account for that. So in looking at that and playing complementary football, what have been some things I guess you've had to do in thinking about how we're going to be as a defense if we're going to be this team that runs fast, moves down the field, maybe hopefully doesn't have a lot of 3 and outs that don't take up a lot of time, but might score fast as well. So how have you been able to make sure that you're still complementary in the way you play ball?
That's a great point. I think there has to be, it's easier being that I'm the head coach, so I can dictate things a little bit more. And I think sometimes when you're the assistant and you're on defense side of the ball, there's definitely times that we probably put our defense in some tough situations. Those quick turnarounds, things like that. But I think when you're the head coach, you can kind of dictate kind of philosophy for the whole program. I think the first thing defensively is you probably have to play more guys. you're going to play more snaps. Our goal is, we'd love to snap the ball 90 times in a game. It's kind of our goal offensively. If we can snap it 90 times, we feel pretty good. Against WLC this year, for instance, we snapped it 62 times on offense in the first half.
Wow.
And I think so defensively, you start thinking about, hey, a normal game might be a traditional tempo. 20 years ago, you may have played 60 or 65 snaps, and now it's probably closer to 70 or 75 snaps is the average. For us, our defense may play 85 or 90 snaps. So maybe it's playing more guys. Maybe it's playing more guys up front just to kind of keep guys fresh as the game goes on. I think the psychology, being a guy that played defense and coordinated the defense, I think sometimes it's not even how many plays you play, it's how many series you play. The psychology of having to get off the bench again and get another stop. The thing that I'll say about it, I think, is the more you score, the easier it is for the defense. The easier it is for defense because obviously you strain the opposing offense. When you play with a lead, you get different looks from the opposing offense. You become a little bit more one-dimensional when you're playing from behind an offense. But I think the biggest thing is psychologically, it's easier to get off the bench on defense when your offense is scored. And when you have confidence that, hey, if we do give up points, our offense can score fast and make it up. So I think, psychologically, you're okay as long as you're scoring on offense. When you're playing fast and you're not scoring, that's when it kind of snowball on you. And we've got, really good buy-in. We were, this year that was one of the things that we were really good at. I think we were strong on both sides of the ball, which helped. But there was tremendous buy-in from not only our defensive coaches, but also our defensive players. And, hey, this is how we're going to play. This is what makes us best offensively. And as a result, that they would just have to respond. And there's times they're put in bad situations. But, there's no doubt that you're going to put your defense, it has to be a program-wide buy-in because you're going to put your defense in some bad situations. You're going to put them in some situations where they're going to play 45 snaps and a half. There's going to be times they come to the bench and it's a 3-and-out and 32 seconds went off the game clock. And that can be hard psychologically. It has to be a buy-in, I think, program-wide.
Being a 10 personnel up-tempo team, I'm imagining you stick with that personnel set quite often, right? You're not changing. When you look at how you call the game, there's different ways you can do it. You look at maybe the traditional teams who were multiple personnel, maybe 11, 12, 21 types like that. They're going to do a lot of things at times that is about staying on schedule, taking shots here and there, etc. Is your approach any different in being that 10 personnel up-tempo team, especially if you get off schedule?
Yeah, I don't think it changes much. We're still, offensively, we're still kind of a run-first offense, I'd say. A lot of times you'll see we're throwing the ball off our run game. So we're still calling our base zone play, but we're throwing a one-on-one. And to me, that's just an extension of the run game and trying, just still trying to stay on schedule. The thing for us, I think the biggest thing is when you're a 10 personnel team, to me, I think one of the strengths is you force teams to play with two overhang defenders. And that was one of the things that I think speed option was so good for us is, if a team just schematically, if they don't want to play with an overhang to both sides of the field, now you have numbers to run speed option, you have numbers to maybe throw your one-on-one, or you have screen numbers, whatever it might be. And then you just start counting, the game becomes really just numbers. So if a team's going to play two overhangs, can they keep a 5-man or 6-man box? To us, our numbers are really simple. A 5-man box, generally we want to run the ball. If we start getting a 6-man box, now we're probably throwing the ball. If we get one high, we're going to try to go vertical. And we've been blessed with really terrific athletes, especially in the outside, a receiver that we can win vertical, quite frequently. But it's still about, it doesn't really change. It's still staying on schedule. For us, we were a little young. We weren't great up front on the offensive line. So for us, one of the ways that we could, really gain some advantages up front where we could get guys out of the box. We get them out of the box by going 10 personnel. We could get them out of the box by throwing our screen game or throwing our quick game, throwing our one-on-one to a single receiver. But that's where I think speed option for us became such a weapon. When you go speed option, our slots who were very good, very talented fifth-year senior kids, they became the key block, and it was no longer our guard. We get the ball wide quick and things like that. So I think it's just, it all kind of complements each other, but it's still about staying on schedule. Third and 8 isn't good if you're a spread team or if you're a wing T team. It's not a great down the distance.
When you look at the scheme, I mean, speed option is relatively simple and easy to understand. But I know this in having tried to run it a little bit is there's a lot of factors that go into it. You know, whether it's how you practice it and drill it, who you're calling it against, and what they're playing. Yep. But probably more importantly, what I found is the quarterback you have and his willingness to, you know, run downhill at a defensive end. And I've had those guys who were really talented quarterbacks who weren't in love with that idea. And I think that's primarily one of the things. But for you, what are the key coaching points in order to make that play work, other than having that guy who's willing to go downhill at that defensive end and pitch that ball out late? Yeah,
that's obviously a huge key. Is that for us, you know, I think we were physical on the outside. You know, we had receivers that were willing to block. You know, so our matchups with, say, our slot receivers versus kind of that strong safety overhang, that hybrid kid that everybody's playing, that's a block we felt like we could get. You know, so our base rules were, you know, just, you know, end man. Our tackle was going to have the play side inside backer. We're not going to block the end man, and then we're going to try to get our number 2 to their number 2, our number 3 to their number 3. You know, so we'd run speed. You know, out of a 2x2 set, we'd run it 3x1, both to the boundary end of the field. So, you know, when we were in a trip set, now we had that number 3 receiver a lot of times to help, you know, almost like a double team block to the play side inside backer up to the safety. And then that block from the slot to the overhang, so that number 2 defender becomes the key block. And that for us, I think, is the key. Is you got to have a kid out there that's willing to get in there and block. You know, and we were talented, you know, at really our skill positions. We started 6 seniors, so 4 senior receivers, a senior running back at the school's all-time leading rusher, and a 5th-year starter at quarterback. So we were talented at those positions. But really, to me, you know, when you're running the ball, if you're running zone or power or whatever it might be, where you're running the ball inside, you know, there's 2 or 3 or 4 guys that have to make a block. You know, for us, when we went speed, you know, we were hoping our play side tackle could get to the play side inside backer. But even if he didn't, you know, we felt like in most situations we had our back now one-on-one with a backer, you know, with maybe a safety coming downhill. You know, but it wasn't like we needed 4 guys to make a block. If our slot could block the overhang, you know, if we could get anything out of our outside receiver against the corner, which is a matchup that we usually feel like we can win, we at least have our back in space now. And we felt like that was a pretty good matchup for us. But, you know, those are the key things. Obviously, work-and-pitch relationship is key. You know, I think anytime you're pitching the ball, you know, especially when your quarterback maybe getting hit and he's trying to pitch the ball, there's some risk there. But again, it's pretty quick. You know, for us, a lot of times it might be 2 or 3 steps for our quarterback and he's getting the ball wide. You know, we pitched it a lot more than we kept it. You know, it almost becomes like toss for us, really. But we also had a quarterback that was willing and able to keep it if he got that read.
On the pitch mechanics, I've coached this different ways over the years, and, you know, the traditional thumbs down to get the pitch versus, and we used to call it basketball pass. What do you guys teach, and what do you feel is most effective?
Yeah, we're more the kind of the basketball pass. You know, our guys done it both ways. You know, late in the year, quarterback was a little banged up with his left hand, so he couldn't really grip the ball with his left hand. So when we went speed left, he would actually 2-hand pitch it, 2-hand shovel it, which wasn't great, quite honestly. But, you know, for us, it's you know, it was kind of what he felt most comfortable with. And it was more that basketball pass, what he felt most comfortable with. So I think you can teach it, you know, a number of ways. We'll do a speed period at least once a week, usually twice a week with our backs. We'll get our slots involved. We'll do a little bit of arc motion where our slots can become a pitch guy. So we'll work with them as well. But you know, we're working it. You know, those guys are constantly catching pitch. They're constantly working the relationship. So I think you can do it a bunch of different ways. I think it's more just a repetition of working that mechanics and, you know, working it with your back. You'll see sometimes where teams will have the quarterbacks pitch the ball to each other, and I think that's okay. But I think you got to get it at full speed, and you got to get it with your backs or your slots. Whoever you're going to pitch the ball to, you got to get them involved.
When you look at high-performing offenses who put up numbers like you guys did, the explosive play is a big part of it for you. What was really the scheme you felt was most explosive in this past season?
Yeah, for us, you know, we were really dynamic with our 2 slots, and they were 2 fifth-year guys. So for us, you know, a lot of it was, you know, a lot of the slot stage stuff that you see everybody running now. We were really good. Our quarterback, you know, threw that ball well. and we had guys that could win. I think sometimes your matchups, depending on where your athletes are, it really depends on what matchup you like. But we felt like our two slots really against, most safeties we saw, and really, I don't know if there's anybody we really thought it was a bad matchup against. That was a route that we liked. So we'll run a lot of the like slot choice stuff, a lot of that stuff where, kind of the quick game, getting the ball out quick and letting those guys kind of play off the overhang defender, play off the inside backer. And then when you start seeing that, you maybe start seeing some safeties that want to be at 12 now coming down a little bit and playing at 10 or 11. And that's the time that we really try to get vertical on them. So for us, as far as explosive plays, really our slot fade game, and we do that a bunch of different ways, but that was probably our most effective vertical shot. And then we'll run, all the four vert stuff and four verts, out of stack looks and, just kind of changing landmarks with our, the landmarks stay the same, but changing the player that's attacking the landmark. So the traditional four vert stuff was really good for us as well. Just trying to run that out of different formations, different looks, and try to change the looks of the defense.
Coach, to wrap things up, when you look at everything you do as a coach, and you've done it all. You've been a defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator, you're the head coach in your program. What would be the one thing you say that you do as a coach that really gives your guys the winning edge?
A couple things, real quick. Things that we made a pretty big change this year philosophically. Really with the COVID year, we played what was supposed to be a 5-game schedule in the spring of 21. We ended up playing 3 games with some of the cancellations in our league. Knowing we were coming back for a fall season, we made a really concerted effort to practice shorter and really to eliminate contact in our practices. So we went from being a team that traditionally practiced for about an hour 50 or 2 hours to a spring season where we didn't practice longer than about an hour and 15 minutes. We had great success with that. We felt like our guys were fresher. They were happier when we got to Saturdays. And I think my evolution as a coach coming into this fall, we talked about it and just said, this is something we want to continue. So we've gone to, early in the year, we practiced for about an hour and a half max. As the year went on, we were probably an hour 15, hour 10 is all we were on the practice field for. And never went full pads. We didn't have a full pad practice. Our running back didn't get hit in a practice this year and just took contact out of practice and really made it our goal to get our guys healthy and happy to Saturday. And really did some research on that. I think some of the stuff you look at, your goal is trying to get your best players at 100% on Saturday, and no one's 100%, especially in a physical season as it goes on. But how close can you get your guys to 100% health? Can you get them to 90%? Can you get them to 95? And if you're playing an opponent that's been banging or maybe practicing a little bit longer, maybe they're at 80%. And I think there's some built-in advantages there. I think the other aspect with that is just the psychology of it. For our guys, wearing full pads means putting on practice pants and knee pads. Most of our guys are going to wear a girdle underneath their shorts. But the psychology of saying you're going full pads versus shells creates a difference. And I think, you can practice the same way, the same tempo, you can even contact the same way you probably are right now by just taking the pants off and changing things. So I think that's one of the things we've done really well. We've become just significantly more efficient with our time. We're not wasting time in the practice field. We're practicing at a very high tempo, but we're more efficient with our time. And then for us, our program's built on competition. So just trying to do everything we can to be as competitive as possible in everything that we do. So whether that's academics, it's speed and agility work, it's time in the weight room, it's on the practice field, just constantly preaching competition, posting results, everything we do, we try to compete. And I think that is something that our players buy into, and it's been something that's really worked for us.
Coach, I really appreciate you sharing all of this with us today. Definitely picked up a lot of coaching points here, I think, that are helpful to our listeners out there. What's the best way for our guys to connect with you if they have some more questions or want to learn more about some of the things you do?
Yeah, I'm very accessible on Twitter. My Twitter handle is LU Coach Bruton. My email is on our website. Feel free to email me. Feel free to call me. I'd love to share. Love to continue reaching out and learning from other guys. So if there's any questions that guys have or different ideas, we'd love to share and love to talk football. And we do a lot of things well here. We don't do everything perfect, and our way isn't the perfect way. It's not the best way for everyone, but I think it can be effective for a lot of people.
Well, Coach, again, thank you for taking the time, and best of luck to you and the Muskies in 2022.
I really appreciate it, Keith. Thank you.